Welcome to Scarlet Vows, where the stories of courageous women who turn their pain into power are recounted with authenticity and deep emotion. Today I will share the journey of Margaret Barnes, a finance professional with 37 years of experience who was once mocked by her colleagues, betrayed by those closest to her, and seemed to have lost everything. But with grit and intelligence, she turned the tables, rebuilt her career, and affirmed her true worth. So please take a seat, relax, and discover how Margaret transformed moments of humiliation into the perfect revenge, ultimately ascending to the pinnacle of empowerment. Chapter 1: A Tribute Party. Drenched in mockery, I arrived at the banquet hall precisely at 6:30 p.m. wearing the navy blue suit reserved for only the most important occasions. The room gleamed with silver balloons and a sparkling banner reading, "Happy Retirement, Margaret." I paused, took a deep breath, and told myself, just 2 more minutes, then I'll leave. When I stepped in, I saw Eric standing in the center of the crowd, tall hair, slicked back, champagne, flute in hand, forcing a smile. Beside him was Jennifer, the marketing girl I'd helped countless times, who merely glanced at me without so much as a greeting. Other familiar faces were glued to their phones or whispering among themselves. I smiled, pressed my palms together in a polite greeting, and accepted a warm glass of champagne from a passing server. Everything happened so fast. Eric cleared his throat, adopting a gravely tone. "May I have everyone's attention? Tonight we're here to honor a company legend." I nodded, watched the silver streamers overhead, and wondered if his praise was sincere or just stagecraft. He glanced down at his notes, then smirked. "Margaret Barnes has devoted 37 years to this company. Remarkable. When she started, we were still using typewriters. Now it's time to enter the digital era." A sneer of laughter rippled through the room. "And to enter that era," Eric continued, "we need to eliminate the dead weight." His words exploded like a bomb. My heart pounded, my throat went dry. The crowd erupted in applause and jeers. Tom from legal banged his hands enthusiastically. Sarah from accounting giggled behind her hand. Even stoic Marcus couldn't hide his mocking grin. I inhaled deeply and forced a smile. Beside me, Robert, my husband, walked in, wearing the crisp blue shirt I'd ironed for him this morning. Yet he didn't come to my side as usual. He cut straight to the bar where Natalie, Eric's sister, was pouring red wine into his glass. I looked him up and down, seeking any sign of comfort, but in his eyes was nothing but infatuation with Natalie. Eric raised his flute. "Let's toast Margaret Barnes, the woman as reliable as an old machine now." The room roared with laughter once more. I slipped my hand into my clutch, my fingers brushing my phone. Before I could act, they had all drained their glasses. A hush fell over the crowd, and I finally responded, "Thank you all for coming. 37 years is a long time, but every day I was proud to work alongside you." I let my gaze sweep over the faces those I'd mentored, those whose mistakes I'd covered. Now they stood there applauding in ridicule. I smiled and walked past Eric. He leaned forward, lips curled in confidence, sure nothing would happen. I extended my hand, gripped his firmly, and looked him square in the eye. "Enjoy the clients." My voice was low just for him. His face flushed. He didn't understand. I released my grip and silently turned away. Stepping through the grand doors to the parking garage, I heard the click of my heels on cement echo behind me. I never looked back. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove off in absolute silence. The radio was off. My phone was silent. Only one certainty remained: come Monday, they would see exactly who I am. And this was just the beginning of my awakening. When those who laughed at me discover that what they discarded was their guiding light, their captain, everything will change. But this story's far from over. If you've ever been demeaned by others, hold fast to your conviction. Never let anyone measure your worth by their mockery. Stay tuned to hear how I exacted my revenge. Chapter 2: The Secret Behind the Wall. That afternoon was an ordinary early weekday. I decided to go home for lunch, even though work was piling up. When I stepped into my home office, I found a plumber crouched under the sink. He needed to shut off the water valve, but in doing so had left a small gap behind Robert's filing cabinet. "Could you help me move this cabinet a little?" he asked. I hesitated briefly, but figured it was no big deal, so together we slid the heavy cabinet away from the wall. In that very moment, several sheets of paper tumbled to the floor. I bent down to pick them up, assuming they were nothing more than old receipts, until I spotted a manila envelope, unaddressed, its only marking written in purple ink for R. I froze the envelope clutched in my hand. 100 questions raced through my mind. Purple ink. The only person I could ever recall Robert dealing with who used that color was Natalie Eric's sister, the one Robert had brought to the office that Christmas. Carefully, I opened the envelope on the kitchen table, the late afternoon sun streaming through the window. The handwriting was neat, the words cutting clear and cold. "My darling R last weekend was a dream. You promised we'd be cautious around the retirement party, but I simply couldn't hold back." Each line felt like a blade to my heart. This wasn't merely an affair. It was proof that Robert and Eric had conspired to push me out of the company. I lifted the letter to my nose and caught the faint trace of a heady perfume. In that instant, everything clicked. This was the leverage I needed to repay yesterday's humiliation in full. Silently, I gathered every scrap of evidence: hotel receipts, text message, screenshots, deleted emails, and forwarded them to a fresh secure email account. All of it would remain safely hidden until the precise moment to strike. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. Robert was coming. I stashed the envelope in a drawer and dropped one stray receipt into the recycling bin, pretending nothing had happened. When Robert opened the door, I greeted him with a bright smile. "Dinner's nearly ready. Are you hungry?" He had no idea that behind that smile lay a carefully laid trap. One thing was certain: Margaret was no longer the passive one, and my revenge had only just begun. Chapter 3: Preparing the Grand Scheme. That night, as darkness settled, I retreated to my silent home office. The pale glow of the desk's lamp illuminated the stacks of papers before me. In my hand was the purple-inked love letter, the first piece of evidence, but one letter alone wasn't enough to bring down an empire. I needed more clues, every detail airtight, so I'd miss nothing. The first thing I did was scour my personal computer, the place where I always back up draft emails, contracts, and the client list the company never knew existed. I uncovered private emails to my most trusted clients, chat logs with longtime partners, and even a spreadsheet with their personal mobile numbers. I sighed, uncapped the leftover wine, and created a secret folder named Judgment Day. From that folder, I gathered every hotel receipt under Robert's name, every old email with the subject line, Paris. Keep this from Margaret, and every flight confirmation printed from the secondary email he thought he'd deleted for good. I organized each file into subfolders: affair, retirement conspiracy, and Eric's complicity evidence. Next, I drafted polite thank you emails to our key clients: Harold Peaton, Barbara, Chin, James Morrison, addressed from Eric Patterson with a copy to the company's senior leadership. Each message began with a carefully crafted opener. I happened to come across some documents regarding, and subtly attached the love letter or a scanned hotel receipt. My goal wasn't to force them into a new contract right away, but to plant a seed of doubt that would compel them to reach out to me for clarification. Simultaneously, I set up bank accounts and finalized paperwork for my new firm, Barnes Advisory Services, which had quietly been registered the week before. I scheduled the emails to send at precisely 8:30 a.m. on Monday, the moment when inboxes are first checked, and people are most vulnerable to morning distractions. I didn't forget to prepare a parallel email to the old leadership team, this one, including the draft of $1 million contract they believed was already settled. Before stepping away from my desk, I took a deep breath. The room was so still I could hear the clock ticking. I smiled to myself, an expression of resolve and relief. This wasn't a clumsy revenge anymore, but a thoroughly scripted performance. Tomorrow morning, with the click of that first send, I would place them on thin ice. And when it cracks, Their entire ship would sink under the weight of secrets they thought long buried. With all evidence secured and the plan complete, I locked my computer, switched off the light, and walked away. Margaret was no longer just the so-called dead weight. I was the captain steering the ship from the ashes they had created. Chapter 4. The Seed of Doubt campaign erupts on Monday morning. I woke at 5:45 a.m. with an uncharacteristic calm in my heart. After a cup of black coffee, I opened my laptop. My inbox was flooded with successfully sent notifications. 19 thank you emails, each bearing unusual attachments, had left my outbox exactly at 8:30 a.m. Before I even clicked to open a single reply, my phone buzzed nonstop. Harold Peaton. He was frantic. Margaret, what's going on with Robert? And Natalie. I answered coolly. I found this document in his contract file and thought you should see it. Then I silenced my phone and exhaled deeply. At my former company, phones and internal alerts blared in chaotic succession. I watched a private chat channel, now again accessible to me, light up with messages like Ms. Barnes has sent. Impossible Peaton is calling legal on speed dial. In accounting, people scrambled, and legal files were hastily gathered. James Morrison, once so proud of his rock-solid IT partnership, was now shouting into the phone. Why is that letter attached to that photo? I smiled to myself. I'm sure he'll have a fine explanation. By noon, the $42 million deal with Peaton had officially closed our very first contract to migrate to Barnes Advisory. Soon after, Barbara Chin called me directly. Margaret, you startled me. The weight of professional responsibility resonated strongly in her voice. At 10:15 a.m., Thomas Bradley received an internal report via group email. 30% of clients were demanding immediate contract transfers. 3 others had launched internal investigations. Eric Patterson, who had hoped to leave his mark with blockchain and AI, was now aghast to discover his entire cabinet of files thrown into disarray. That afternoon, I received a message from Jennifer Margaret. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I replied in 3 simple words. It's all clear. As the day drew to a close, I shut my laptop with a smile. The first phase of revenge was complete. The seeds of doubt had been sown throughout my old company, and I was about to watch their ship falter under the weight of the secrets they thought long buried. Today they had no excuse left about seniors struggling with technology. I had planted these doubts with my own hands, so when they awoke confused, they wouldn't know which shore offered true safety. The game had only entered Act of 4, and the drama was far from over. Chapter 5. A New Beginning Among the Ashes. On the 3rd day after the email campaign exploded, I stepped into an entirely different world. Barnes Advisory Services had just opened its doors, a small riverside office with transparent glass walls that welcomed shimmering sunlight every morning. I'd hired a charming receptionist desk and added a few potted plants to create a warm atmosphere, an intentional contrast to the coldness of my old company. The phone rang incessantly. Kelly, our newly hired secretary, announced Margaret, Mr. Peaton has sent over the contract and wants a Zoom meeting at 10 a.m. I smiled. Perfect. Have him send his report by email first, and then we'll meet in person. At exactly 10 a.m., the call screen lit up with Harold Peaton's name, the same man who'd just saved my former firm from crisis. He beamed. Margaret, you've made me happier than anything, I replied. You believed in me, and I won't let you down. The call ended, and our contract total quietly climbed higher. By midday, I was meeting 2 new clients in person, Barbara Chin and James Morrison. In each meeting, their eyes shone with gratitude and surprise. They needed not only expertise, but also someone they could truly trust. I shared my 37-year journey in the industry and gently added, here we'll collaborate in the most personal way possible instead of treating you like another number. That afternoon, I sat with 2 new hires, both women over 40, who'd been overlooked at my old company. I placed a steaming cup of tea in front of each of them and said, here you are not just employees, but teammates. I want to create opportunities and a real place for you. They nodded quietly, their eyes bright with eager hope. I understood that beyond revenge, I wanted to restore faith in those like me, those once undervalued. Later, stepping out onto the balcony to gaze at the languid river below, I felt a profound stillness. In the distance, the old company's building loomed like a painful memory. But today I was building a new future from those very ashes. Every successfully signed contract, every employee I helped flourish, stood as proof of the strength and resolve of a woman who would never be underestimated. There were no mocking laughs, no scornful glances, only wide-open opportunities and a dawn of renewed confidence. And I knew the greatest satisfaction wouldn't come from watching them fail, but from forging spectacular success that proved you may be discarded, but you can never be stopped from rising. Chapter 6, Confrontation and the Bitter Vindication. 1 week after the email punch, I received an unexpected invitation to return to my old company, not to work but to attend an urgent, all-hands meeting. Honestly, I had no intention of stepping back across that threshold of mockery, but my key partners, including Harold and Barbara, insisted I be there. I drove to the familiar building and passed through the cold, white-lit lobby. In the hallway, I crossed paths with Marcus, the quiet IT guy, who'd laughed when Eric called me deadweight. Now seeing me, his face turned red and he averted his eyes. I offered him a small, knowing smile and walked on without a word. The 12th floor boardroom was packed executives, partners, Eric looking crestfallen, and Robert, sweating bullets of remorse. Thomas Bradley opened the meeting. Margaret, thank you for coming. We'll start with your presentation. I nodded and stood. First, congratulations. I began evenly to all of you for surviving your first real shock. Many here thought I was worthless. Cutting me loose would speed the company ahead. I folded my arms and turned to Eric. But you forgot one thing. I wasn't just an employee. I was the bridge to our clients. The room fell so silent, you could hear chair legs scrape against carpet. I pulled out my phone and projected a chart. 60% of contracts had transferred to Barnes Advisory. 40% were still under review. These are the results, I said. Not luck, but the personal relationships I built over 37 years. Robert choked out, Margaret, I don't understand. I offered a cold smile. You understand perfectly. You chose to trust her, Natalie, over your wife. You and Eric plotted to push me aside. And what happened? You lost everything. Eric lowered his head, eyes glistening. I'm sorry. I shook my head slowly. Sorry doesn't change a thing. You dug your own grave, Thomas interjected firmly. Margaret, we'd like to propose retaining the key contracts to prevent further damage. I laughed quietly. You've forgotten something else. I'm not here to save this company. I'm here to prove that even when discarded, I can stand on my own. Robert looked around helplessly. So, what do I do now? I shrugged. You might start by figuring out what truly matters. With that, I gathered my papers, tucked my phone into my bag, and walked out. On the drive back, I received a message from Jennifer Margaret. I've been promoted to lead the new project. Thank you for the opportunity. I smiled and replied, always happy to empower you. Back at Riverside Business Center, I settled into the chair I'd placed by the window. Gazing at the distant tower of my old company, I felt a simple yet profound satisfaction, not from their downfall, but from preserving my own worth and creating new chances for those who deserved them. They once called me deadweight. Today there is only me, free, steadfast, and true to myself. Chapter 7, The Final Blow by the Supermarket Doors. One weekend morning, I stopped by my usual supermarket to pick up a few odds and ends. I had just reached the frozen foods aisle when I heard the purr of an engine through the glass doors, a blazing red Ferrari, Eric Patterson's car. He was standing there, eyes darting, as if hoping I'd appear and beg for forgiveness. I paused and looked him straight in the eye. In that instant, no words were needed. We understood each other. I offered him a courteous smile. Eric, it's nice to see you again, he stammered, flustered. Margaret, I just wanted to. I shrugged lightly, my tone calm. Good luck finding a job. It seems you'll need it." Then I walked away, leaving him frozen amid the frozen foods like a stranded fish. A rush of triumph surged in my chest. I knew there were more battles ahead, but this was the final blow. The one who once mocked me now stood silent under the supermarket's cold fluorescent lights. Back at the office, life flowed on. I met with my team, outlined plans to expand into the next city branch, and discussed hiring new staff. Each grateful smile, each trusting glance was reward enough. That evening, I sat by the window watching the river reflect the sunset. This journey was not just a flawless revenge. It was a declaration: when a woman knows her worth, no one can unseat her. From today on, I am no longer dead weight. I am the one who sets the course. Chapter 8, closing the triumphant finale. On the fourth day after that final blow at the supermarket, I awoke with a gentle smile. There was no longer any lingering resentment, only a fullness of freedom. I stepped onto the balcony to gaze at the river, sparkling in the dawn light, and thought to myself, how far have I come since they called me deadweight? That morning, I arrived at the new office earlier than usual. My colleagues were already waiting with steaming cups of coffee. They brought good news: the transfer paperwork with Morrison Group was complete, and an international nonprofit had just approached Barnes Advisory to become a strategic partner. I nodded, my eyes bright at the prospect of our expanding reach. During our mid-morning meeting, I shared a brief story about being humiliated at that banquet, not to complain, but to underscore the lesson: when you know your worth, no one has the right to measure you by their insults. My team listened in respectful silence, exchanging looks of admiration. Late that afternoon, I received an invitation to appear on an online talk show titled Women Launching Businesses After 60. I seized the opportunity and recounted my journey from ridiculed to guiding clients to safe harbors. Positive feedback poured in, hundreds of encouraging comments and questions about how to build long-lasting relationships. I answered simply: be genuine, be consistent, and dare to rise again when you stumble. On my way home, I stopped at a small cafe and ran into Robert. He was gaunt, his gaze contemplative. This time he didn't make a scene. We exchanged a nod, a gesture from our shared past, yet transformed. I gently said, "I wish you every success in finding a new path." He simply smiled, and I walked away. That weekend evening, I hosted a free workshop titled Empowerment for Women Over 40 at Riverside Business Center. More than 30 women of various ages attended, women who had once been like me, once underestimated. I shared my experiences and guided them on leveraging personal networks and converting hurt into fuel for progress. When the session ended, they burst into applause, eyes shining with hope. I realized that my greatest success was empowering others. Quietly returning after a full day, I sat by the window with a glass of wine at my side. The city lights glittered below. I reminded myself, the journey isn't over, but today it feels complete. All the conflicts, the schemes, and the humiliation were now behind me. I wasn't just standing firm, I was leading, inspiring, and paving the way for many more women. And as night fell in that peaceful moment, I recalled my own words. No one can discard you unless you allow them to keep hold of your heart and your dreams. That was the final message of this journey: transform your pain into power and close the chapter with a triumphant flourish. Thank you for joining Scarlet Vows for this dramatic and inspiring story. Margaret has shown us that when a woman truly understands her inner worth, no one and no amount of ridicule can ever bring her down. Share the moment that impressed you most in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss our next empowerment story. No matter where you are, remember, the greatest power lies in rising from your own setbacks. See you in the next video.